Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 5 Minutes PM podcast. Today, I'd like to discuss with you the mechanisms of forecast of time and cost. It's very, very important when we are monitoring a project that we decide and we try to have something like a crystal ball to forecast what will happen. And basically, we have 4 different approaches to do this forecast. One is extremely popular, so everybody knows, but I want to talk more about the other 3. So the most popular, for sure, is the time series. And what's the time series? It's based on historical information. When you do extrapolations based on mathematical equations to forecast based on the past, the future. The example of that is the earned value analysis. What's the earned value analysis? I use the index, performance index, based on cost performance index or schedule performance index to forecast. And what is the forecast? It's just a projection of what I did. So I'm assuming that the future repeats the past. This is all project management software. They do exactly this. So it's you calculate the variance, then you try to create something like a rate of progress, like the index, and then you forecast based on that. So this is the most popular, and almost everybody knows only this way to forecast. But let's talk about the other 3. The second one is the causal and economic. What is this? It's an analogy between data. It's based in a relationship of cause and effect. Let's suppose that I have a project. The project will address the construction of a new factory to produce umbrellas. And what I do to forecast, one of the big pieces of my project, let's suppose that the project is not only the construction, but also the creation of marketing, business, and sales team and everything. So I need to make a forecast of sales to see the return on investment and prepare my business case. And then I create a correlationship between the amount of rain, historical amount of rain, and the sales of umbrellas. So it's a very, very logical way of doing this and very easy to explain to you. They use something like econometrics. So this is what we use in this case. It's very interesting. There is one book called Freakonomics from Stephen Levitt and Dubner that it's very interesting because they exactly work on this economical behavior, this econometrics. And what they do, they create some unusual correlations. I create a very usual. You use umbrella to protect you against the rain. So if rains more, you want more umbrella. So it's very logical. But you can create something that is not too logical. So this causal and economic aspects can forecast the results. The third group, it's the judgmental method. It's an intuitive method where I join experts, people with huge creativity, and I start building scenarios. I start thinking about the future without any mathematical reasoning for that. So I create. So I use my knowledge and think, okay, in 2 years, the people will request this. In 5 years, the team and the relationship among workers will be this way. So I try to figure out scenarios. This is very creative, very powerful. It's not based on historical information, okay? But on the other hand, it's very risky because the variation can be extremely large. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose that I work with government security, okay, against terrorist attacks. And then I hire people from the movie industry to create possible scenarios for an unconventional terrorist attack. So the people will imagine, okay, someone doing this, doing that, and then I can use this to forecast potential new kinds of attacks. But I'm not using a reasoning for that. I'm not using historical of past attacks. I'm not using a causal effect. I'm trying just to figure out in a very creative way of imagine what could happen in the future. And the last group, the fourth group, is the others. In these groups, I put together probabilistic models, Monte Carlo simulation, mathematical simulations, where I use a lot of mathematics, some historical data, and I try to, using random numbers, to forecast potential outcomes. And what's the difference between this last group and the time series? The time series is just an extrapolation. I take the results and I multiply by the remaining work that I need to do, and then I will have the forecast. The others know I will use a much deeper mathematical process, simulations, trying to understand what's going on. Why I recorded this podcast, you may ask. I recorded this podcast just to open the minds of the people while thinking about forecast. Because everybody think only about time series, extrapolation. And this is not necessarily the best way of doing that. Imagine all the products and the new products that we faced in the marketplace in the past 10 years. Most of them in the technology sector. For sure, historical information weren't too relevant in this case. Maybe the judgmental method or some causal economic make these people create such a nice products and such a completely different sets of products, services that we have right now. It's not only based on the historical information. So folks, I hope you enjoy this podcast and see you next week with another topic in another 5 Minutes PM podcast.